There was once a county in the vast sweep of the American horizon where the echo of sawmill wheel and the measured footfalls of cattle along rutted tracks were, after the fading of day, the lingering notes of human presence. Tonight, let us imagine that place not as it stands in the fevered present, but as it was when dawn came to fields and forest with the whisper of wind among tall grasses and the slow, unhurried flow of water under ice in distant creeks. Welcome to the American Gazetteer. Tonight, we turn the pages of history back to the gentle lands of Oakland County, in the state then known simply as Michigan, where in the year 1880, as enumerated by the Census of the United States, a multitude of souls tilled soil and reared family beneath a canopy of oak and elm. Though the exact tally of population rests upon archival ledgers set deep in drawers of vaults and libraries, that count, in the tens of thousands, bore witness to a community balanced between farmstead and hamlet, woodland and meadow, the hum of plow and the hush of creek. In those years after the Civil War, the county had taken shape from early surveys and settlements. Its boundaries, once part of larger expanses that gave way as the Republic grew, marked a tract of land where native oaks and maples intermingled with the cleared fields of settlers, where roads followed the gentle rise and fall of land and streams carved their quiet courses. Toward the north and west, the limbs of Paint Creek wandered through stands of timber and open fields, easing in their flow to meet the broader current that came to be known as the Clinton River. These waterways were the sinews of the county's earliest settlement, nourishing soil and giving rise to modest grist mills and fording places where wagons crossed and neighbors met. Within the county's gentle ridges, the land surrendered rich earth of loam and sandy loam, fertile for grains and grasses, for grazing cattle, and for the orchards that spread pale blossoms come spring. Wheat and oats, the backbone crops of a farming people, caught the light of morning sun. Clover and timothy grew sweetly in pastures where horses and cattle grazed at ease. Even in those humble years, the discipline of raising livestock, horses of steady gait and cattle of broad flank, marked the pride of many a homestead. The township names whispered through the county like a measured litany. Avon, with its wide open fields, Bloomfield, where timber met clearing, Brandon and Commerce, Farmington, Groveland, each a modest community at the crossroads of track and trail. In the heart of this expanse lay Pontiac, the county seat by the bank of the Clinton River, where merchants and town officials gathered beneath awnings and verandas to tally accounts and speak of weather and crop. In the quieter reaches, near White Lake, in the rolling hills of Waterford, on the fringe of Oxford, families bore names that threaded through tax rolls and neighborhood recollections. Surnames like Allen, Auten, Clapp, and Baldwin echoed in the careful records of assessment books and diaries held by those who cared for memory. It was to these places that the surveyors of the land came, section by section, township by township, reducing wildwood into parcels of measured acre and rod, numbered and bound for deeds. In such manner the frontier receded, and the labors of sowing and reaping took root as a defining rhythm of county life, a cadence of plow-furrow and harvest, of barn-raising and winter store, all witnessed beneath star-strewn skies. In these first quiet chapters of Oakland County's life, the river and creek were more than simple lines upon a map. They were the pulse of days and nights for those who drew their living from field and meadow. Long before the rail tracks cut lines of iron through the velvet bosom of earth, these waters guided wheelwright and miller, fisherman and youth alike, and carried the soft reflections of moonlight where only the whisper of breeze dared disturb the stillness. Thus, as twilight settled upon barns and homesteads in the broad year, when the census enumerators made their rounds, there lay a hush upon the land, a hush born of life lived according to season and soil, of hearth fires lit against lengthening shadows, and of simple reveries toward dawn yet to come. As the seasons turned upon the fields of Oakland County, the life of the land unfolded not in moments of sudden change, but through habits quietly repeated. Morning followed morning with the same pale light touching fence, rail, and barn door, and evening returned with equal certainty, drawing long shadows across furrowed earth. It was in this steady recurrence that the county found its character, shaped less by singular events than by the faithful observance of daily labor. The roads of the county, though spoken of as such, were often little more than widened tracks pressed into the soil by wagon wheels and hooves. They followed the lay of the land rather than defying it, bending gently around marshy ground, climbing where the ridges allowed, and descending toward water crossings known to every resident by habit rather than by sign. In dry months, dust rose softly behind passing teams. In spring and autumn, the same paths yielded to mud and ruts, reminding all who traveled them that nature remained the senior partner in movement and time. Along these roads lay the scattered farmsteads, each set at a respectful distance from the next, as if the land itself required breathing room. Houses were most often of frame or log, weathered by years of wind and sun, with pitched roofs and porches that faced the work of the day. Barns stood nearby, larger than the dwellings they served, their doors opening wide to receive wagons heavy with hay or grain. Smoke from kitchen chimneys rose in thin columns at dawn and dusk, a sign not of industry alone, but of continuity. Water remained the quiet constant beneath all such activity. The Clinton River, moving patiently through the county, gathered into itself the smaller creeks and runs that threaded meadow and woodland alike. Paint Creek in particular traced a course that was familiar to miller and farmer, its banks bearing witness to footpaths worn smooth by generations. In winter, ice sealed its surface, but even then its presence was known by the hush that settled over the frozen channel, deeper and more complete than the surrounding fields. The mills that arose along these waters were modest in scale, yet essential in purpose. Their wheels turned steadily when conditions allowed, converting grain into meal and timber into boards with a patience that mirrored the county itself. Men gathered there not only to conduct business, but to exchange news, inquire after neighbors, and measure the season by the sound and speed of the turning wheel. Such places served as informal centers of exchange, binding together farms that might otherwise have stood in isolation. In the townships, small settlements took shape at crossings where road met road or water met land. A general store, often serving also as post office, stood as the anchor of such places, its shelves holding necessities ordered from distant cities and delivered by rail or wagon. Nearby, a blacksmith's shop rang with measured blows, and a schoolhouse stood ready to receive children whose attendance bent to the demands of planting and harvest. Churches, simple in form and earnest in purpose, gathered families beneath pitched roofs on the Sabbath, offering both instruction and repose. Within these communities, names passed quietly from one generation to the next, appearing in church registers, land deeds, and the margins of ledgers kept with careful hand. Families who had arrived decades earlier now watched their children take up adjoining acres, extending the pattern of settlement outward like rings upon still water. Marriages joined neighboring farms. Births and deaths were recorded with solemn precision, each entry a small acknowledgement of time's steady claim. The rhythm of the year governed all things. Spring brought the breaking of soil and the anxious watch for late frost. Summer followed with long days of cultivation beneath a sun that knew no haste. Autumn arrived with the measured urgency of harvest, barns filling and fields emptying in turn, while winter settled at last with its quiet instruction in patience. Snow softened the land's contours, muffled sound, and drew families inward, where lamplight and conversation bridged the longer nights. Even in moments of rest, work was never entirely absent. Tools were repaired, harnesses mended, and plans laid for seasons yet unseen. Children learned the lay of the land as naturally as they learned their letters, committing to memory the bends of creeks, the boundaries of fields, and the distance between homestead and town. In this way, geography itself became a form of inheritance, passed not through document alone, but through daily familiarity. As night fell across Oakland County, lamps were lit one by one, their glow modest yet sufficient. Beyond the reach of such light, the countryside rested in darkness broken only by starlight and the occasional call of nocturnal life. It was during these hours that the county appeared most itself, the labors of the day complete, the land returned to a quiet state that asked nothing further of those who dwelt upon it. Thus moved the days and seasons of the county in the years surrounding the great enumeration of the people, not marked by spectacle, but by steadiness. Each road, each waterway, each dwelling stood as a testament to lives lived with attention to the immediate and the enduring alike. And in this calm persistence, Oakland County held its place within the broader fabric of the nation, neither seeking notice nor escaping memory. In the settled years of Oakland County, labor was neither hurried nor begrudged, but accepted as the proper companion of daylight. From the first pale stirring of morning until the soft withdrawal of evening, hands found their purpose in tasks long familiar, each action guided by memory rather than instruction. The land did not demand innovation so much as attention, and those who worked it learned early that constancy yielded more than force. Fields were laid out with a practical regard for slope and drainage, their boundaries marked by rail fences fashioned from nearby timber. These enclosures, repaired each spring where frost or cattle had tested their strength, gave order to the broad acres beyond. Within them grew the staple crops of the county, wheat that ripened to a dull gold, oats that bent easily in the wind, corn rising in disciplined rows, each planted and harvested in turn, according to a calendar kept less on paper than in habit. Livestock formed the living measure of a farm's prosperity. Horses, valued for their steady temperament as much as their strength, drew plow and wagon alike, while cattle grazed patiently in pastures bordered by shade trees left standing for shelter. Sheep were fewer, yet present, their wool shorn and stored with care. Chickens ranged freely near the house, contributing quietly to the household economy without ceremony or remark. The barns that housed these creatures were built with an eye toward endurance. Heavy timbers joined by wooden pegs bore roofs pitched to shed snow, and wide doors admitted wagons laden with hay. Within, the scent of dried grass and grain mingled with that of earth and animal warmth, a fragrance inseparable from rural life. In lofts above, children sometimes climbed to watch dust motes drift through shafts of light, learning without lesson the dimensions of work and space. Water drawn from wells or nearby streams governed the placement of each structure. A reliable spring was prized beyond fine soil, and families spoke of such sources with a respect bordering on gratitude. In times of drought, these waters were watched closely, their levels noted morning and evening, while in seasons of abundance they were taken as a given, part of the county's quiet generosity. Household labor followed its own steady order. Women tended gardens set close to the dwelling, where vegetables grew for immediate use and herbs dried beneath eaves. Kitchens were places of constant motion, though little of it appeared hurried. Bread was mixed and baked with practiced hand. Preserves were prepared in season and stored against winter's need. Children assisted where able, learning through repetition rather than command. Clothing, too, bore the mark of local effort. Wool spun and woven nearby found its way into garments mended repeatedly before being set aside. Shoes were repaired by local craftsmen, their soles thickened and stitched anew, extending usefulness beyond what the maker first intended. Such acts of preservation were not spoken of as economy, but as sense, and no virtue was claimed for them beyond necessity. The exchange of labor bound neighbors together more firmly than any written agreement. Barn raisings drew men from surrounding farms, each bringing skill and strength, knowing his own turn would come in due season. Women gathered in equal measure for quilting or preserving, their conversations carrying news as readily as instruction. These gatherings were unremarkable in the moment, yet essential in forming the fabric of county life. Children's lives moved between work and learning without clear division. Attendance at the schoolhouse was shaped by the agricultural year, lessons yielding when planting or harvest required extra hands. Inside those plain buildings, instruction was delivered with firmness and patience, the same qualities demanded by the fields beyond. Reading, writing, and sums were taught not for ornament, but for use, preparing the young to manage land, accounts, and correspondence in time. As afternoon lengthened, the pace of labor softened. Tasks requiring daylight were completed, tools cleaned and set aside, animals secured for the night. The lowering sun cast long bands of light across fields now quiet, and the county seemed to pause as though drawing breath. It was in these hours that one sensed the full measure of the land, not as property, but as presence. Evening brought families together beneath roofs warmed by day's work. Supper was taken without haste, conversation unfolding in familiar patterns. Outside, insects traced their brief lives in sound, and the air cooled gradually, inviting rest. Lamps were lit not brightly but sufficiently, and the county settled once more into its nightly stillness. Thus passed the working life of Oakland County, shaped by soil, season, and shared understanding. Nothing in it sought distinction, yet everything within it served a purpose. Through such days, repeated and reliable, the county sustained itself, leaving behind few monuments but countless traces of quiet endurance. Within the dwellings of Oakland County, life assumed a quieter register, one less visible from the road yet no less ordered. These homes, whether framed in sawn timber or squared from logs long since weathered smooth, were arranged according to a logic born of experience. Rooms were few, their purposes clearly understood, and every corner bore evidence of use rather than display. Comfort, when achieved, came not from abundance, but from suitability. The central room of the house served many functions without confusion. Here meals were prepared and taken, garments stitched and repaired, accounts reckoned, and correspondence read aloud by lamplight. A stove or hearth stood as the heart of this space, its warmth regulating both body and routine. In colder months, chairs were drawn nearer, and conversation lingered longer, shaped by the steady crackle of fire and the knowledge that work beyond the walls had yielded for the moment to rest. The furnishings were plain and durable. Tables bore the marks of years of use, their surfaces smoothed by countless hands. Chairs were often mismatched, acquired or fashioned as need arose. Beds were set into corners or small adjoining rooms, their frames sturdy, their coverings layered against winter cold. In these sleeping quarters, nights passed quietly, broken only by the distant sound of wind or the occasional movement of livestock outside. Walls held few adornments, yet those present were chosen with care. A calendar, perhaps bearing an image of distant scenery, a framed certificate of marriage or military service. A family Bible resting upon a shelf, its pages recording births and deaths in careful script. Such items anchored the household in time, connecting present routine to memory and expectation alike. The preparation of food reflected the seasons with faithful regularity. Root vegetables stored in cellars sustained families through winter, while preserved fruits and meats supplemented the daily fare. Bread, baked frequently, filled the house with a scent both ordinary and reassuring. Meals were not elaborate, yet they were sufficient, taken together when possible, and marked by gratitude more implied than spoken. Women's labor within the home was constant, though rarely acknowledged as such. Washing, mending, cooking, and tending to children filled the hours between dawn and dusk. Yet within this labor lay moments of quiet reflection, found in the rhythmic motion of needle and thread or the measured stirring of a pot. Knowledge passed informally from one generation to the next, techniques learned through observation and repetition rather than instruction. Men, returning from fields or workshops, carried the day's exertion into the home, setting aside boots and coats with practiced gestures. Evenings might be spent reading aloud from newspapers or almanacs, their contents discussed briefly before yielding to silence. In such moments, the world beyond the county entered the household, though always at a remove, filtered through print and tempered by distance. Children occupied a space between work and play, their presence woven naturally into the household's rhythm. They were assigned tasks suited to age and strength, yet found time for games fashioned from imagination rather than object. Stories were told and retold, some inherited, others improvised, their repetition offering comfort and continuity as daylight faded. Illness and hardship, when they came, were met within these same walls. Remedies were prepared from stored herbs or purchased when possible from town. Neighbors offered assistance quietly, appearing with food or labor without ceremony. Recovery or loss was accepted as part of the larger pattern of life, spoken of in subdued tones, recorded carefully where record was kept, and carried forward in memory. As night deepened, the household settled into rest. Lamps were extinguished one by one, darkness reclaiming the rooms. Outside, the county lay still, its homes scattered like points of warmth amid wide stretches of shadow. Within each dwelling, sleep came gradually, attended by the knowledge that morning would return with its familiar demands. Thus, the interior life of Oakland County unfolded, largely unseen by those who passed along its roads. These homes, modest and unremarkable, held the greater portion of the county's existence, shaping character as surely as field and stream. In their quiet persistence, they preserved a way of life measured not by event, but by continuity. Beyond the bounds of house and field, life in Oakland County found its continuity in the presence of others. Distance did not diminish familiarity, for neighbors, though separated by acres and woodland, were known through shared labor and repeated encounter. A wagon passing on the road was recognized by horse and harness. A light seen at an unusual hour prompted quiet concern rather than curiosity. In this manner, community existed not as a declared institution, but as a practiced awareness. Visits were made without formality. A caller arrived by foot or conveyance, tied a horse at the rail, and entered after a knock that required no announcement. Such visits served many purposes at once. News was exchanged, small needs discovered, and companionship offered without insistence. Conversation moved easily between weather, crops, and family, resting where it would, and resuming after pauses that carried no discomfort. Church gatherings marked the shared rhythm of the week. On the Sabbath, families set aside labor and traveled familiar roads to modest buildings whose doors stood open in welcome. Within, hymns were sung without ornament, voices blending according to memory rather than training. Sermons addressed conduct and endurance more often than doctrine, drawing lessons from Scripture that aligned naturally with the trials and steadiness of rural life. Afterward, conversation resumed outdoors, extending the gathering beyond the hour of worship. Seasonal events offered further occasions for assembly. Harvest suppers, held once fields were cleared and stores secured, brought together households in celebration restrained by habit. Food was shared generously, yet without excess. Gratitude was expressed plainly. Such gatherings affirmed not achievement alone, but mutual reliance, reminding all present that individual effort found its meaning within collective survival. Markets and town days offered a different form of meeting. In Pontiac and smaller centers, farmers arrived with produce or livestock, merchants displayed goods ordered from afar, and officials conducted the measured business of the county. These occasions introduced a mild liveliness into the otherwise steady pace of life, though even here, voices remained moderate and movements purposeful. Transactions concluded, wagons turned homeward, and quiet reclaimed the streets. Education, too, drew families together. School exhibitions at term's end allowed children to recite lessons and display penmanship before parents and neighbors. Pride was expressed through attentive silence rather than applause, and encouragement took the form of quiet praise offered afterward. Such moments reinforced the shared investment in the next generation, linking households through common hope. At this point in the county's unfolding story, it is fitting to pause gently. Some listening tonight may find themselves far from these fields and meeting places, while others rest nearer than they realize. Wherever this account reaches you, your own place in the present stood, like these homes and roads, upon layers of lived time. These pages remained open only while they were read. By remaining with us, you helped keep such histories quietly alive. Disputes, when they arose, were addressed with restraint. Matters of boundary or obligation were discussed first between neighbors, with recourse to local authority only when necessary. The aim was resolution rather than victory, and reputation carried weight enough to encourage fairness. Records of such matters, entered into county books, were brief, their language precise and unemotional. Life's passages, birth, marriage, and death, were observed collectively. A new child was welcomed with gifts of labor and provision, a union celebrated with modest festivity, a passing marked by solemn attendance and shared remembrance. Cemeteries set on gentle rises or near churches received their charges quietly, headstones carved with care and restraint. These places, visited on occasion, stood as the county's most enduring archive. As seasons advanced and years accumulated, these patterns held. New families arrived, others moved on or faded from record. Yet the county's manner of belonging persisted, sustained by repeated gesture and shared understanding. In such ways, Oakland County maintained its cohesion, not through proclamation, but through habit. While the fields and homes formed the visible fabric of Oakland County, a quieter network of trade and craft sustained its daily functioning. This exchange was neither hurried nor expansive, but deliberate, shaped by need rather than ambition. Goods moved along familiar routes, passing from hand to hand, with an understanding that value rested as much in reliability as in novelty. Artisans held an honored place within this order. Blacksmiths, their forges set near crossroads or village centers, worked iron into shapes essential for farm and household alike. Horseshoes rang upon anvils, wagon tires were fitted and cooled, and tools repaired with practiced economy of motion. The sound of hammer on metal carried across open ground, signaling not industry alone, but assurance that work could continue as planned. Carpenters and wheelwrights labored with equal steadiness. From seasoned timber they fashioned wagons, doors, and furniture, each piece suited to its purpose and expected to endure. Repairs were undertaken before failure occurred, reflecting a mindset attuned to maintenance rather than replacement. Such craftsmen were known personally to those they served, their reputations secured through years of dependable work rather than advertisement. Merchants provided the link between county and wider world. Their stores, modest in size yet varied in stock, offered items not produced locally: cloth, hardware, coffee, sugar, and printed matter. Orders were placed with care, inventories managed conservatively. Customers arrived not only to purchase, but to inquire after shipments, exchange news, and mark the passage of time through recurring visits. Transportation shaped these exchanges. Wagons drawn by horse conveyed produce to market and returned with supplies, their journeys planned around weather and road condition. Rail lines, where present, introduced a measure of regularity, yet did not alter the county's pace so much as support it. Schedules were noted, arrivals anticipated, and departures accepted without urgency. Mills remained central to this circulation of goods. Grain brought in from surrounding farms was weighed, ground, and returned as flour or meal, ready for household use or sale. Timber followed a similar path, emerging as boards that would become fences, floors, or barns. These transformations were understood as part of a shared process, linking individual effort to communal provision. Money circulated alongside barter, though neither displaced the other entirely. Accounts were kept carefully, balances settled at agreed intervals. Trust, built over time, allowed transactions to proceed without constant verification. A handshake often sufficed where documents might otherwise have been required, reflecting a confidence rooted in familiarity. As evening approached in village and township alike, shops closed their doors and forges cooled. The day's exchanges concluded, goods finding their way to homes and barns. Quiet returned to streets and lanes, leaving behind the sense of order achieved through cooperation rather than command. Thus, through craft and trade, Oakland County sustained itself, its economy modest yet sufficient. Each exchange reinforced the county's underlying principle, that continuity depended not on expansion, but on balance. In this measured commerce, the life of the land found support without disturbance, and the rhythm of days remained intact. Time in Oakland County was not measured by urgency, but by recurrence. Days followed one another with a reliability that required little comment, and weeks passed marked chiefly by the return of familiar duties. Clocks were present in some homes and public spaces, yet their authority was secondary to light and weather. Morning was known by the lifting of mist from low ground, evening by the lengthening of shadow across field and fence. The year unfolded in a sequence well understood. Spring announced itself not by calendar alone, but by the softening of soil and the first movement of water freed from ice. Seeds were placed with care, guided by memory of former seasons, and watched over with patience. Summer followed with its long, steady days, when labor extended from early light until the sun withdrew, and rest was taken in measured intervals rather than declared hours. Autumn brought a sense of completion rather than haste. Fields were cleared, produce stored, and the land prepared for its winter rest. Trees shed their leaves gradually, revealing the familiar outlines of hills and fences once more. Winter arrived with a quiet authority, shortening days and drawing life inward, yet it was accepted as a necessary interval rather than an interruption. Within this cycle, lives progressed from youth to age with little remark. Birthdays were seldom noted beyond family circles, and anniversaries passed acknowledged chiefly by memory. What mattered was not the counting of years, but the fulfillment of expected roles as time allowed. Children grew into labor, adults into responsibility, and elders into a position of quiet counsel. The county maintained its records with diligence. Births, marriages, and deaths were entered into ledgers kept by clerks whose handwriting bore the weight of repetition. Census takers passed through at appointed times, noting names, ages, occupations, and origins, reducing lived experience to columns of ink. These records were accepted without sentiment, yet they formed a silent backbone of order, ensuring that each life, however modest, was acknowledged in the official memory. Church registers mirrored these accounts, often adding details of character or circumstance. A baptism, a union, a burial, each was observed with appropriate gravity and then released back into the flow of days. Graves were tended periodically, their markers standing as quiet affirmations of presence rather than declarations of loss. Illness, when it appeared, altered the rhythm briefly. Work slowed, neighbors stepped in, and attention narrowed to the care of the afflicted. Recovery restored the familiar order. Passing brought a pause of a different kind, marked by subdued gathering and reflection. In either case, life resumed its course, shaped but not halted by the event. The passage of time left its mark upon the land as well. Fields once newly cleared bore the signs of long use, fences laned slightly with age, and roads deepened where wheels had passed for decades. Yet these changes were gradual, absorbed into the county's appearance without disruption. What endured was not a fixed image, but a continuity of function and purpose. As evening settled once more across Oakland County, the sense of time's movement softened. Lamps were lit, meals taken, and conversation yielded to quiet. Outside, the land rested in darkness, holding within it the traces of days just past and seasons yet to come. In this manner, time was lived rather than measured, and life progressed without insistence upon its own passing. Weather in Oakland County was accepted as both guide and companion. It shaped decision without demanding commentary, arriving in its seasons with a familiarity that rendered complaint unnecessary. Rain fell when it would, sometimes gentle and lasting, sometimes brief and heavy, soaking the fields and darkening the roads. Snow followed its own quiet laws, settling across roof and pasture alike, softening the land's outlines and drawing all activity inward. Storms, when they came, were observed with attention rather than alarm. Clouds gathered slowly, their movement read by those accustomed to watching the sky. Thunder passed over fields and woodland, leaving behind the scent of rain, and the reassurance of water returned to soil and stream. Such events were remembered briefly, noted in conversation, and then folded back into the larger continuity of days. Winter imposed a deeper stillness. Roads narrowed beneath snow, travel slowed, and the county's scattered homes appeared more distant from one another. Yet this isolation carried its own form of comfort. Within houses, fires were kept, meals prepared, and tasks adapted to shorter days. The soundscape altered as well, hoofbeats muffled, voices subdued, the wind assuming greater presence across open ground. In these months, silence itself became a feature of life. It settled over the fields at dusk and lingered through the night, broken only by the creak of timber or the distant call of an animal. Such quiet did not suggest absence, but completion, as though the land had finished speaking for the day. Those who lived within it understood this silence not as emptiness, but as rest. Night revealed the county in another aspect. With few lights beyond hearth and lamp, darkness held sway across wide expanses. Stars emerged clearly, unobstructed, their presence familiar yet seldom remarked upon. Moonlight traced faint paths across frozen fields and along the course of rivers, offering just enough illumination to remind the watcher of the land's form. Animals moved within this darkness with greater ease than men. Livestock shifted within barns, wildlife traversed fields and woods, and birds marked the hours with occasional calls. These sounds, sparse and unforced, contributed to the county's nocturnal character, reinforcing the sense that life continued even as human activity receded. In spring, the county awakened gradually. Snow withdrew into shadowed places, water returned to motion, and the land resumed its familiar tasks. The cycle completed itself without declaration, requiring no ceremony beyond the first turning of soil and the return of birdsong. Each year resembled the last closely enough to reassure, yet differed just enough to command attention. Through all these variations, Oakland County remained itself, whether altered appearance but not purpose. Silence deepened experience without diminishing connection. The land and its people moved together through these changes, adapting quietly, without urgency or display. Thus, in observing the county at rest, one understood its true measure. It was not defined by moments of activity alone, but by the spaces between them, the pauses, the hush, the waiting. In these intervals, the county revealed its enduring nature, grounded in patience and continuity. As years accumulated upon the quiet acres of Oakland County, memory settled into the land much as seed fell into prepared ground. Not every act was recorded, nor every voice preserved, yet the accumulation of ordinary days left an imprint discernible to those who knew how to observe it. A field kept in cultivation across decades bore witness to more lives than any ledger might name, and a road worn smooth by passing wheels recalled journeys long concluded. The county itself became a kind of record, composed not of pages, but of use. Fence lines traced decisions made by earlier hands. Orchards marked the hope of permanence held by those who planted them. Even abandoned clearings spoke quietly of effort once applied, their return to brush and young timber a reminder that time, though patient, was unceasing. Names spoken aloud within families carried memory forward where paper might fail. Children learned the stories of grandparents and great-uncles not as history, but as explanation, why a field lay where it did, why a road bore a particular bend, why a house faced east rather than south. Such knowledge was transmitted without ceremony, folded into conversation and daily instruction, becoming part of the county's living inheritance. Official records, when consulted, offered only a partial portrait. Census schedules and tax rolls listed occupations and ages, but left unmarked the patience of a farmer waiting upon weather, or the quiet resolve of a household enduring loss. These unrecorded qualities formed the substance of county life, sustaining it through years that differed little in outward appearance, yet varied deeply in individual experience. Change arrived gradually, often without announcement. A new method adopted here, a tool improved there, a road extended slightly beyond its former reach, each adjustment absorbed into the county's routine without disruption. The past was not discarded, but layered beneath the present, its influence persistent though seldom named. Those who departed the county carried its rhythms with them. Whether moving to neighboring regions or farther afield, they retained habits shaped by Oakland County's measured pace. An attention to season, a respect for land, a preference for steadiness over haste. In this way, the county extended beyond its boundaries, existing also in the conduct of those who had once belonged to it. For those who remained, continuity provided reassurance. Familiar sights greeted them each morning, and the land responded predictably to care. Even as individuals aged and were replaced by younger hands, the pattern held. The county did not resist time, it accommodated it, allowing change to occur within an enduring frame. As evening returned, as it had so many times before, the county appeared once more in its settled aspect. Fields lay quiet, homes drew inward, and the accumulated weight of years rested gently upon the land. In that moment, Oakland County existed not as a single year or generation, but as an ongoing passage, one that asked only to be observed with patience. In the fullness of its settled life, Oakland County did not announce itself with monument or proclamation. Its presence was known instead through endurance, through the unbroken succession of days shaped by soil, weather, and human care. What had been built was not spectacle, but sufficiency. What had been preserved was not grandeur, but balance. In this, the county fulfilled its purpose without drawing attention to itself. The land, having borne generations of labor, retained the memory of each in subtle ways. Fields once cleared by hand continued to yield under familiar cultivation. Roads maintained their courses, altered only where necessity required, their bends and rises remaining faithful to the contours first followed. Waterways traced the same paths they always had, reflecting sky and season without preference or haste. Those who lived upon this land understood, often without articulation, that they were part of something already in motion. Their efforts joined a sequence begun before them and destined to continue beyond their own measure. In tending fields, raising families, and maintaining homes, they contributed not to a moment, but to a continuity that required no witness beyond itself. The county's towns and townships remained modest in their aspirations. Growth, when it occurred, was absorbed carefully, aligned with existing patterns rather than imposed upon them. Institutions endured because they adapted slowly, retaining familiar forms while accommodating quiet necessity. In this manner, change arrived as adjustment, not interruption. As the years progressed, the county's identity remained rooted in place rather than time. One season resembled another closely enough to reassure, yet each carried its own character, shaped by weather and circumstance. The people learned to read these variations with care, responding as needed and trusting the larger pattern to hold. Night, when it came, gathered the county gently. Lamps glowed briefly, then were extinguished. Darkness returned without resistance, settling over fields, roads, and water alike. In that darkness lay neither absence nor conclusion, but rest, a pause within the larger movement of days. It was in such moments that Oakland County revealed its truest nature, not in labor alone, nor in gathering, nor even in memory, but in the calm acceptance of continuity. Each life, however unrecorded beyond local notice, contributed to a shared steadiness that outlasted individual names and dates. Thus, as this account draws to its natural close, the county remained as it had been, composed of ordinary lives lived attentively, bound to land and season, and sustained by habits repeated with care. Nothing more was required of it, and nothing further was asked. And thus we close the entry for Oakland County. Rest well.